Hello, if you clicked on this video, you are clearly curious to know why muscle might be the missing piece for you in your fat loss journey. And if you've been killing yourself with workouts 5, 6, 7 days a week, girl, you feel like you're living in the gym, you're restricting calories, and you are just not seeing the results that you feel like you deserve for the work that you are putting in, you might be missing one of the most critical pieces of the fat loss puzzle. So what if I told you that the very thing that most women avoid, building muscle, usually because they're scared of looking manly or bulky, is actually the key to unlocking sustainable fat loss and a metabolism that works for you, not against you. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Sam. I'm the founder of Rise and Thrive Wellness. I work with high-performing women. I have helped hundreds of them to transform their body and their metabolism through strategic body recomposition, balancing their hormones, and making smart lifestyle shifts. Today, in part 1 of this video, we're going to talk about the why of muscle being the missing piece in your fat loss journey, and you'll understand exactly how building lean muscle mass transforms your metabolism and gets you better results. Next week, I'm going to be releasing part 2 of this, which is kind of the how, and I will show you exactly how you can implement this approach into your life, even with a busy schedule. You'll get a clear roadmap to telling you how to do this without needing to spend hours in the gym, without worrying about getting bulky, and you'll feel much more confident by the end of that video of being able to apply this method and practice into your own fitness journey. So we're going to jump into why muscle is so important in this journey and how skipping it can make a big negative impact, in the results that you're getting. First, I want to kind of highlight the problem that I see with most high-performing women. So the problem that I see very frequently is they focus almost exclusively on fat loss through creating a calorie deficit through diet restriction and cardiovascular or like high impact activity. And this can commonly look like reducing their calories, right? Slashing them way down. I've seen people even eating like under 1,000 calories per day, which is bonkers. If you are doing that, no judgment, but that's why you're here, right? We're getting you a better way. But they do this to create the deficit, right? And when they hit a plateau, they're like, oh my God, that means I need to bring it lower and lower and lower, right? They add in more and more cardio to burn additional calories, or maybe like if it's not like direct cardio like running or the Stairmaster, maybe they're doing HIIT classes like F45, Orange Theory, that kind of style, like high intensity, high calorie burn, big sweating kind of workouts. That's what they kind of attain a good workout to, like the amount of calories burned on their Apple Watch and how much they sweat. They avoid strength training with meaningful weights. They're not using progressive overload at all. And they're constantly feeling hungry, tired. Maybe they're having cravings and they're just super frustrated with their results, right? So this is kind of the loop that I commonly see women stuck in when I start to work with them. And while this approach may work in the short term, like maybe they drop a couple pounds on the scale in the beginning from the initial stimulus, unfortunately, it's often water weight. This often leads to them hitting a plateau and feeling like they're in an uphill battle through once they get past that. And it's very hard for them to get themselves out of that hole that they've dug for themselves, right? So there's 3 reasons or 3 problems that I really see happening with this when a woman has been going through this loop for, maybe it's months, maybe it's years. And this is that this loop and this method right here, first and foremost, is metabolically destructive. So what will happen is after you've been eating in a calorie deficit, especially if the calories are really low, and you've been working out a lot, high output, right, through cardio or HIIT training, whatever it might be, for a long period of time, your body will downregulate your metabolic rate. So what will happen is that your baseline calories of how your metabolism functions, right, will actually lower to match the input that you are giving it. So while you think that you're in a calorie deficit, eating 1,200 calories, now that's actually your new baseline because your metabolism has slowed down to match that. So what happens over time is that this creates a frustrating plateau that women can't get past and like leads to them eating less and less and less while also having a negative impact on their health. Second, it triggers a hormonal response that promotes fat storage. So especially around your midsection, which none of us want to hear. But the combination of eating low calories and restricting paired with excessive output, usually cardio or high intensity, will increase cortisol. And that will actually signal to your body to hold on to fat and store more fat. And the reason that this does this is because your nervous system switches on to your fight or flight mode. And when your body is in fight or flight, it's in this high stress response where it's in survival mode. So it's going to hold on to this body fat and probably metabolize more so that it has that as a reserve to support you for energy for later. So this is not conducive to an environment of your body feeling safe and in a place where it can let go of body fat. And then third, it causes you to lose muscle alongside the fat. So this approach causes you to lose muscle, like not just fat. When you're losing weight, if you're seeing the scale go down, you're actually burning a lot of muscle. Most women don't realize that up to 40% of the weight lost when taking this approach with diet, being in a deficit and cardio alone, is actually muscle tissue. And the problem with this is that your muscle is actually what drives your metabolism, right? So you're also then down-regulating your metabolism even further by burning a bunch of muscle tissue, which we don't want. And it's also going to lead you to looking more skinny fat as well, because you're losing that muscle tissue there that is going to make you look more firmed and toned, defined for what your baseline amount of muscle is. So clearly, after discussing all of this, the solution isn't more restriction or more cardio. It's a strategic plan that is going to focus on muscle building, which will completely transform how your body processes calories, how it responds to food, and ultimately how it looks. So now that we've talked about the problem, we're going to move on to, like I said, the why. Why is building muscle the solution, right? So this is where muscle enters the chat. And I want to talk a little bit about why muscle is truly the metabolic gold standard and how it transforms your fat loss efforts. So first and foremost, the first reason is that your muscle is transforming your metabolism, right? I've already said this a couple times, but your muscle is directly linked to the function of your metabolism. So your muscle tissue is metabolically expensive. And what that means is that it requires significantly more energy just to maintain itself than fat tissue. So every pound of muscle mass you have on your body will burn approximately 6 to 10 calories at rest per day. So like when you're sitting, watching White Lotus, maybe you're scrolling through TikTok, you are burning 6 to 10 calories per pound of muscle mass on your body. However, when you're comparing that to, that doesn't seem like very much, right? But when you're comparing that to fat only burns 2 to 3 calories per pound on your body, right? So you're looking at 2 to 3 times more calories potentially being burned in a day by your muscle tissue versus your fat tissue. And obviously not everybody is going to be solid muscle mass, right? So when you're trying to do the math and you're trying to add it up, you're like, well, does that really make that much of a difference? But just to kind of put it into perspective, right? We're going to use easy math here, just because for the sake of this conversation, like I said, in a perfect world, we know nobody is 100% fat or 100% muscle. We're, a mix of both. But just to put it into perspective, if you were 100 pounds of fat, you'd be burning 200 to 300 calories per day, just from your body composition with no movement, just at rest. Whereas if you were 100 pounds of muscle, you'd be burning 600 to 1,000 calories per day at rest, just from having muscle mass on your frame, doing nothing, right? No movement. So it's a really big difference. And then when we scale that down into a more digestible, kind of point, just by adding 5 pounds of muscle per day, which isn't really that much, right? You're burning an additional 30 to 50 calories daily, doing absolutely nothing. Your insulin sensitivity improves, helping nutrients go to the muscle instead of the fat storage. So what happens is our insulin, which is a hormone, what that does is it will decide, if our body, when we eat carbohydrates and glucose, if that is going to be taken from the bloodstream and pulled into the muscle cell to be used for energy, or if it is going to be stored as fat, right, into our fat storage. So when your insulin sensitivity is better, that means you're going to be using more of the carbohydrates that you eat as energy, and it's going to be metabolized into fat less often. Your body becomes more efficient at using fat for fuel, and your resting metabolic rate increases permanently, right? So when you have muscle mass on your frame, that means that you're going to be burning more calories at rest, which in the long term means that it's going to be easier to maintain your body composition or achieve the body composition that you want, because you're burning more calories at rest, and your metabolic rate is functioning at a higher amount. This is just a picture of me you can see here. So in the top, this is when I was around 35% body fat. On the bottom, I'm about 21 to 22% body fat. So I completely transformed my body composition by losing fat and gaining muscle mass. And it's a big difference here, you can see, right? And between these two photos, I actually weigh more on the bottom than on the top. I'm lighter on the top, but obviously you can see my shape and my physique is much better on the bottom. And the difference between when we're talking about your metabolism and burning calories, the difference between these two photos is about 250 calories burned per day more on the bottom, which is actually the equivalent of a 20 to 30 minute run. So I'm burning the calories just by having this muscle mass on my body of what I would be doing going for a 20 to 30 minute run every single day by doing nothing, right? Just from taking the time to build this muscle mass. Next, we have the hormone optimization effect. So when we build muscle, right, we just talked about the impact of building muscle and how that's going to increase how many calories you're burning at rest, but it doesn't just impact calories. It fundamentally shifts your hormonal environment to favor fat loss more. So this is done through these four hormones here that we're going to talk about today at least. And the first one is insulin sensitivity. So I did touch on this, in the last point, so I won't spend too long on it. But muscle tissue creates more insulin receptor sites. So what that means is that it improves your ability to process carbohydrates and glucose and use them as energy, right? Pull them into the muscle cell and use them as energy and preventing them from being stored as excess fat. It's going to improve how your growth hormone responds. So by doing proper strength training, that's going to trigger the growth hormone release, which accelerates fat burning while preserving lean tissue, right? So helping to preserve that muscle mass that you have or that you've been building. And then we have testosterone. So this is probably where the girls are like, ooh, like weird. Like I don't want testosterone, right? And this has nothing to do with steroids, right? We're not talking about taking testosterone. We're talking about optimizing the way that your testosterone functions in your body. Because as women, we do have testosterone levels naturally. They're much lower than what men have, but we do have it, right? And we do want to make sure that it is functioning optimally to get the results that we want. So appropriate strength training will actually optimize your testosterone levels within normal female range. And this will not only improve your body composition, which we all want, it'll actually help improve your energy as well. And then lastly, we have cortisol regulation. Cortisol is probably like the most popular one you hear about a lot. It's all over social media, right? And unlike excessive cardio, because excessive cardio will actually spike your cortisol, proper strength training will help regulate your cortisol patterns because we should have cortisol in the body. We don't want to have no cortisol because having no cortisol is equally as damaging as having chronically high cortisol, right? We just want those patterns to be flowing and functioning optimally. So this is going to also help reduce stress-related fat storage as well when our cortisol patterns are functioning the way that they are intended to. I have a third reason, and this is probably one of my favorites, that muscle is so important when we're talking about hitting your fat loss results and getting, the body that you want, is the shape and definition factor. So one of the most overlooked aspects of muscle development is its role in creating the shape and definition on your body. And this is what most women refer to when they're talking about, looking toned, or they'll say I want to get lean. But even though theoretically lean just means a lower body fat percentage, what they actually want is that firm, defined, looking like they work out. You can see muscle definition, but not over the top. That's the goal for most women, right? And they want to kind of have curves in the right places, but not jiggly curves. They want firm, lifted curves, right? And what that is having muscle mass. And the truth that most women don't understand is that you can't define or tone what isn't there. So if you don't have muscle mass to begin with, a strong foundation of muscle mass, it's really hard to do very much with that, right? And build upon that. And it's a frustrating phenomenon I see with so many women that they've lost weight through diet and cardio and they've reached their goal weight, that idea of what they wanted the scale to say when they reach their goal. However, their body doesn't look anything like they thought it would. They still appear, while they appear smaller, they still appear soft and squishy. What's often defined as that skinny fat kind of look. And even though their stomach is flat, it's not firm, right? They don't have visible definition, or maybe their arms, right? Their arms are smaller, but they're not tight and toned. So this is basically just because fat loss without muscle development just creates a smaller version of the current shape that you already are. The definition, the curves, that kind of sculpted physique that most women strive for actually comes from having well-developed muscle mass, which sits under a smaller layer of health, having a healthy body fat percentage. So you can see here, right, on this screen, this is an example of 5 pounds of fat versus 5 pounds of muscle. So muscle can take up significantly less space while having this, because it's more compact, while having the same amount of numbers of pounds on the scale, right? And this is why, again, going back to this initial picture that I showed you, I'm much heavier in this bottom photo, but I look way tighter, more compact, more defined because I have way more muscle mass. So, 150 pounds of this versus 150 pounds of this, if you go down here, imagine 150 of these versus 150 of these, like that's going to look vastly different, right? Also, muscle creates shape where you want it. So when you're targeting certain areas, like if you want properly developed glutes, like my client Lauren here, or maybe you want shoulders or your back, my back, like my client Julia here, right? You can see that they built a shape by adding muscle mass. So Lauren here, this is another great example. She weighs less in this photo than she does here, but her waist is way tighter. Her hamstrings and quads are more defined and more shaped, and her glutes are way bigger here. But this is with her adding 10 pounds on top of here, even though she looks way better here than she does here. I mean, not that she looks bad here at all, but this is what she wanted, right? The end result. Same thing with Julia. You can see Julia here. She doesn't have much muscle mass on her frame. She's very petite. This is after she lost a bunch of weight, and she was, again, kind of skinny fat. She felt like she was very soft. She didn't have much firmness or definition to her. And then this is after we did a solid phase with her focusing on building muscle because she wanted that like lean, sexy, defined back. She wanted more round, full glutes. She wanted to look strong. She wanted to look like she works out, right? And both of these clients were able to achieve that look with building muscle mass and not being so obsessed with the fat loss side of things. Muscle also provides the underlying structure for definition. So even with low body fat, like you can see here on Julia, like it doesn't really matter how low your body fat percentage is. If you don't have the muscle underneath, nothing's going to be coming through. You need it to be able to create these curves and give you that sculpted shape that you want. That's why focusing on the scale as your main indicator of progress can be super, super misleading, because your goal body is more often than not heavier than you would expect it to be because muscle is denser and more compact than fat. So while it weighs more, it still is smaller, but most women have this mentality that smaller means lighter, and that is not necessarily true. So, while this can be hard to kind of wrap your head around and to change, it can be really important to take the scale out of the equation and start focusing more on progress photos, how your clothes fit, taking measurements, and that can be a much better indicator of progress while focusing on building muscle mass. So you can clearly see here between my client Lauren, my client Julia, my own personal progress up here, right? That not only does building more muscle mass improve your metabolism, which is going to lead to better results physically, it is, improving your internal health and your internal body function. It's going to optimize your hormones to function more optimally. And it's going to improve your body composition by looking more like the body that you want to obtain and improving your body composition. The last topic we're going to touch on here is the long-term metabolic advantage. So this is where the magic really happens for especially busy, high-achieving women, because building muscle creates long-term resilience and flexibility with your body. So a question that I really often get from people is, how do you only work out 3 days per week and not lose all your progress? Or how can you go out for a dinner and eat whatever you want and not stress about it and not feel like it's going to ruin all your hard work? And the answer to that question is because I took the time to build a metabolic foundation that is going to support me not having to upkeep these high expectations all the time. Is having a foundational, healthy life important to me? 100%. But there are going to be periods and seasons of my life where I'm not able to work out as much as maybe I am in others, or maybe I need a little bit more flexibility in my diet. And I'm able to have that flexibility because of the strong foundation of muscle mass I built on my frame and having a higher functioning metabolism. So one meal isn't going to even make a dent in my progress. Taking a week off from going to the gym is not even going to, impact my body and my physique at all. Maybe I'm going to feel a little bit more depleted because my muscles aren't going to be as full from not exercising, or, maybe I might feel like I'm retaining a little bit more water, but within a week or two of getting back to the gym, I'm completely back to my normal baseline, right? And this is because I have created this environment for my body to thrive in. So like you can see here too, right? Like this is what I was before I built a lot of muscle, and this is what I maintain my body at now. This is the same thing with my client, Gabriella over here, right? So like this was her normal when she was working really, really hard. She was doing HIIT classes 5-6 days per week. She was dieting. She was doing all of the things. And this here is with her going to the gym 3 to 4 times per week, eating double the amount of food that she was here. And she just lives at maintenance in this body now, right? Way more defined, way leaner, way more shape. And that is because she took the time to build the solid foundation, right? So when we're talking about the long-term metabolic advantage, it's going to help prevent damage to your metabolism, right? Unlike restrictive dieting, muscle-focused approaches prevent metabolic adaptation and damage because you are eating a higher amount of calories and you are recovering better from the training. You're not overtraining either from the training that you're doing. It also allows for metabolic flexibility, so your body becomes better at switching between fuel sources, right? Carbs versus fats, making you less dependent on perfectly timed meals. You don't have to be as strict with the things that you were eating all of the time, and you don't have to worry as much about those things like I just explained. You can go on vacation and not really have to stress about it. You can have a really busy week at work and only make it to the gym 2 times per week, and your metabolism is going to support that. Another huge factor as women that we really need to consider is age-related metabolism protection, right? If you are in your 20s right now, you are not going to be 20 forever, girl. If you're past your 20s like me, you need to start building muscle now. After age 30, women naturally lose 3 to 8% of muscle mass per decade, already lowering your metabolic rate, right? So that's a baseline if you are already having muscle mass, right? If you don't put in the work to build muscle mass, you're already starting at a disadvantage. So strength training prevents and reverses this decline, right? And really helps you keep up with that as much as possible moving forward. It's also going to support your metabolism as you age. As we age, it is harder to have a thriving metabolism, especially as a woman, because of hormonal things going on in your body as you hit perimenopause and menopause, as well as naturally as you age. Like for most people, you tend to be a little bit more sedentary, right? You're less active, you have less energy, like all of these things. So you do want to focus on what is in your control to support having better metabolic function. And then lastly, sustainable results, right? So this is what I was talking about in the beginning, but by having a metabolism that you have built to be healthy and high functioning, and you have that muscle mass on your frame, this stays with you. So unlike the temporary effects of diets or cardio programs, those feel like, you're always striving to have to upkeep that. It's like you stop doing the diet and the cardio plan, and a month later, if you've stopped doing that and you go back to your normal ways, you just bounce right back, right? And you got to feel like you got to do it again. And how often are you in these cycles of like diet, restrict, cardio, go back to normal life, put 10, 20 pounds back on, do it again. And you're constantly doing this every time you have a vacation, a personal event, a birthday, a wedding, whatever it is, right? Whereas when you take the time to build your metabolism up and build muscle mass, you don't have to constantly live in this cycle. It's just more maintainable and more sustainable long term. And you can see right here, right? This is another one of my clients. This was Ricky. So, I followed up with her 6 months after we finished our program together, and I asked her like, how have things been going? How are you feeling? And she said, I'm doing so good. Honestly, not much has changed. Maintaining my results through summer pretty easily. It's still crazy to me that I can stay on track while enjoying food, not even needing to track all the time anymore because I know how much of everything to eat. So again, by taking the time to build the foundational habits, that's part of that, but also taking the time to build the muscle mass, like she could live her summer stress-free and just enjoy herself. She didn't have to worry about, having an ice cream and making her feel like she was going to gain 10 pounds from eating an ice cream, or, maybe not going to the gym one weekend because she was going to go to a pool party. She shouldn't have to feel guilty about that because she built this solid foundation for her body and her habits to support more flexibility in her life long term. And then the last thing I just want to touch on in this video is the why of muscle, right? Is the myth of getting bulky, and saying you're scared to build muscle because you're scared of getting bulky is like saying you're scared to become a millionaire by getting a job, right? Like if you feel like, oh my God, I'm scared to go lift heavy weights and intentionally eat to try to build some muscle, that's like saying that you don't want to get a job because you're scared of just by accident to becoming a millionaire. It just doesn't happen, right? So when we're breaking down why this is, it's one of those things where like, it's ludicrous to me, but it's because I understand the science behind it, right? So that's why I'm here explaining it to you. But there's 3 reasons, why this isn't going to happen if you are intentional with what you're doing, right? So the first one is testosterone, and this is going to be the most like the biggest thing that's going to be the impactor to this is that women have 10 to 30 times less testosterone than men. making it physiologically nearly impossible without taking steroids to build bulky muscle. Like I said, without specific protocols to do so, which, you know, when we're talking about specific protocols, this comes down to taking steroids and calorie surplus and training, right? So we're going to get to those two in a minute. But the women who develop significant muscle mass, right, and even significant muscle mass usually isn't what you're envisioning for getting bulky. When we say getting bulky, that's usually people that are, like I said, taking steroids and doing so for a bodybuilding competition purpose, right? And when you're taking steroids, that's a whole different ballgame. But the women who do develop significant muscle mass, if it is natural, is because they're genetically predisposed to do so. And this is extremely rare. Or they're following specific protocols, like nutrition and training protocols that are like very, very laser focused into this, which most women are not doing. So we're going to move on to like that portion of it. So like you need to be eating in a very, very large surplus to be getting bulky with muscle mass. So unless you are eating like 5,000 calories a day, like you do not need to worry about getting bulky in terms of lifting weights and building muscle mass. You know, the people who are, for lack of a better term, eating like a garbage can, right? If you're sitting and like eating a giant tub of Ben and Jerry's every day and then you go in and lift some weights, like, yeah, you might look bulky, but it's not because of the muscle that you're building. It's because of the fat that you're putting on in the surplus, right? So it all comes down to like, sure, you might be building some muscle, but the layers of fat that you have on top of that muscle are what's going to make you look bulky. So this all comes down to the methodology that you're taking. And we're going to get into that next week with the how, right? And we're going to talk about using different fitness seasons and using a certain method to get to your end result in the long term. But if you are eating in a giant caloric surplus, yes, you are going to look bigger and bulkier, but usually that's not even because of the muscle. It's because of the fat on top of the muscle. And then training, right? So again, if you are training to be a maximum power lifter, like maybe you might get a little bit bulkier again, in addition to eating in this caloric surplus, and or taking substances, performance enhancing substances. But most people, again, you are not training with the idea of putting on mass amounts of muscle. This is going to come if you're taking like, you're doing like a bodybuilding competition program or something like that. So like all of these things are things that most average women, especially high performing women that are busy, they're working a lot, like you don't have the time to be focusing on any of this, right? So this is something that like is kind of a non-starter in this position, but a lot of women concern themselves with and think that it's a possibility, but it's as rare as this saying right here, I promise you. So basically all of the benefits that we just talked about far outweigh the like 1% risk of feeling like you're going to get bulky. So I hope you found part one of this informative and helpful. And, you know, like you can see here that this method and this approach works with all of my clients that I showed here, with Gabriella, Lauren, Julia, myself, right? So if you're interested in, you know, learning more about how to get a custom approach for your goals and your physique, and you want to cut out the trial and error, throwing spaghetti against the wall, book a free strategy call in the link below, and we will walk you through a roadmap on how to get to your goals. If not, you want to stick around and watch part two, stay tuned for that next week, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe on your way out, and have a great day.